Sorry. No, we can't always assume that everybody knows who Tim is, you know. So you might have seen his picture on the Methodist website. Oh, I think I'm sorry, Sam. I was doing so well as well. I think I might have broken this mic. Thank you.
Right, should be good.
Yeah, so I was thinking it's getting a bit gloomy, yeah. So Tim's Director of Safeguarding for the Methodist Church, as I said. He started work in Connexion safeguarding team at the end of 2015, following 30 years in community development, social work and training. He's worked for the church, local authority and Barnardo's charity, developing new services for children and families. Throughout his career, he's contributed to safeguarding developments within the Methodist Church and sister denominations. He seeks to draw from this experience and his professional knowledge in order to move safeguarding understanding, practice and policy forward. The publication of the Methodist Church's past cases review in 2015 was a watershed for the church. It set our agenda for the last 10 years, which have seen unprecedented developments in safeguarding understanding and practice. And this has led to the creation of a single safeguarding service that now covers the whole Connexion through our 4 regional safeguarding teams. So it's our pleasure, Tim, to invite you to come in.
Thank you very much, everybody. This is going to be very short because we've got to be home by 3 o'clock to watch the final.
Tim, some of us have it on our phone at the moment.
Oh, really?
And anybody staying behind to help tidy up after, I've asked Jeff to put it on the big screen.
But if, like me, you're going home to Bristol after this, it's not going to happen. And you might hate football anyway. I realise not everybody likes football. Well, the first thing I wanted to say was thank you for the welcome, but also what a great day it's been, I think, in terms of the input that has been given by, first of all, Caroline, and then Karen, and then Cole, and Helen. I've had the pleasure of hearing Cole and Helen and Karen before, and I still find myself writing down things that I've not kind of taken in, or maybe they've described differently. But it's such a rich resource we've got in what people have offered us today. And again, I would just say, if you're a bit like me, it doesn't really matter if you've not taken it all in. If you've taken 2 or 3 things away today, then that in itself is valuable. I don't know if you can read that clearly. I saw this in a bookshop down in Looe in Cornwall back at Easter, and it really tickled me in terms of the notion of when you can expect to have this bookshop open, and the notion of some sort of customer service and clarity and consistency. Does it really matter? You know, this shop will be open when I feel like it, and you take chances. As I went past, the shop was actually open. It was sort of early evening, you know, nothing else was open, but this shop was still open because obviously it was the right time. And I wandered in, and it was the most strange collection of books and leaflets and things. So there was a real sense of kind of almost junk shop about it, rather than a kind of well-organised bookshop. So what's that got to do with what we're looking at today? the first thing I wanted to do in terms of giving a sense of where we are with our safeguarding work across the whole church, not just your district, not just your circuit or your church, is some of the developments that we've been working on over the last couple of years. And that's the creation now of one single safeguarding service for the whole church, rather than what we had before, which was a district safeguarding officer for each district. And being here, you'd already gone through a process whereby your districts had come into one bigger district, so you had a kind of head start really in terms of that idea of let's share what we've got and move towards greater consistency in how we actually offer the services to the wider church when it comes to professional safeguarding input. And so that bookshop for me is almost like at the other end of the spectrum of what we're not doing. We do not want differential practice and approaches. We are moving towards getting a standardization at a higher level. So we want to build on the best practice that we've got around the connection and make that standard so that we are doing best practice wherever we are. So our new connectional safeguarding team continues to have this overview around policy and procedures, but we're now working in 4 regional teams. So it's NWED Plus. I'm pretty sure that this regional team is probably the biggest in terms of overall size. Whether it's the best, the staff here will tell you. And moving towards that now that we have all the regional officers on the same job description and the same contractual terms, we can actually get to a point of doing everything in a very similar way. What we had before was 25 odd districts who had all employed their district safeguarding officer with slightly different contracts, slightly different emphases and ways of working. You at church and circuit level should not experience anything particularly difficult other than it should be even better than it was. There shouldn't be any sense of loss because we are still doing the same work. We are simply wanting to do it in a way which is going to be more effective. And to a large extent, apart from Jill that's just joined us, you've got the same staff that you had before. So we're very fortunate that of all of the staff that came across as district safeguarding officers into the new team and became regional officers, of that whole group, only 2 did not transfer across during that period last year. So I think that was also a vote of wanting to continue to be part of this journey that we're on from those members of staff. So the other things we do are the commissioning of risk assessments where there is a significant concern about somebody, and facilitating a safeguarding panel to make decisions about that, and the ongoing development of our training materials, whether that's adding new or whether that's refreshing what we've got. So those of you familiar with the advanced module, that will be completely refreshed for next year, and so the working group has started to look at that already. We've also in the team now got lead managers for the areas of adults, vulnerable children and, vulnerable adults and also for children and young people. And we're replicating that at regional level. So within your regional officer team, there'll be a lead person for that area of work. We've also got a lead in the management team for working with mission partners and other countries and conferences. Most of that work, as you might imagine, is not people jetting off to the other side of the world. It's working on Zoom, it's making connections where we can actually use that technology. Most recently, I've made a link with a newly appointed safeguarding advisor for New Zealand, the Methodist Church in New Zealand. I think this is the first time they've appointed somebody to take on that role. So it's quite interesting what we can now do in terms of just sharing practice between not just within our own connection in Britain, but actually other Methodist churches around the world. We have a number of ecumenical links here in Britain. I meet with the leads of safeguarding leads for many other churches particularly the Church of England. And it's always stuff that we kind of pick up and learn and we can share. We're in a very interesting position because the way the Methodist Church is currently approaching safeguarding has gone pretty much in the opposite direction to how the Church of England are approaching it. So they are in the process of contracting out their whole national safeguarding team. The Church of England has decided that they no longer have confidence that they can adequately provide their safeguarding work in-house, that they require an external independence of this. Our Methodist Church has decided that we want to have our service in-house, we want to take responsibility for it, because we believe that in order to shift our culture, we have to own it. And it's harder to do that if you're trying to do it from the outside in. Now, time is going to tell whether we've got the right model. I'm certainly very committed to us making this work, but we will obviously review how we do this. Equally, time will tell what happens with the Church of England. I think that they are in a rather different position to us in terms of confidence that people within the church and outside of the church have in their safeguarding processes, which is what's led them to make this decision. Although I saw last week the review which has been released of their diocesan audits. They've had an independent body looking at those, and it's largely positive about the current safeguarding work, the current professionalism of diocesan safeguarding advisors and the national team. But I think within the Church of England Synod, there's a loss of confidence. So they're taking that direction, even though the current practice is being quite well reviewed at the moment. If there was more time and you hadn't been sat here all day, I'd play you a film now. I'm not going to do that, and we've obviously just had some thinking and focus about the place of survivors, how we learn from survivors, how we integrate that perspective into all of our work. The film I wanted to show was another piece of work that our Methodist Survivors Advisory Group has been working on with, I think, largely other members of the group rather than yourself, Cole and Helen. You're not on the film, are you? Yeah. This is a lovely bit of film which has been made. You may have come across this already. It's about the Eric Gill painting, which is owned by the Methodist Modern Art Collection, which has proved quite problematic, because subsequently, although Gill is quite a well-known artist and renowned in his field, he was also revealed to be an abuser. And so a few years ago, the Methodist Modern Art Collection were debating what to do with this painting. Should they just burn it? Should they give it away and pass the problem on to somebody else? Or do they just keep it under lock and key? And so part of that consultation was they came to the Methodist Survivors Advisory Group and said, what do you think? And I think they fully expected the group to say, you shouldn't even be discussing this. It needs to be destroyed. And that's not the discussion that ensued. The advisory group sat down with the trustees and said, this could actually be an opportunity to use this as a stimulus for opening up a conversation about what do we do over what is often called contested art. And there's a whole debate within the art world, not just about paintings, but about all sorts of pieces of art, where the artists themselves are problematic.
I think the thing that I said, burn it. And I was so wrong. You need to look that. It's probably the best thing. We do other things without all the best things.
I expect you were surprised to hear that Helen would be quite so outspoken about something. But, you know, equally credit to her for, you know, shifting her position on that. And I think probably quite a few of us did, to be quite frank. So the film has been made to it's not just about the artwork, not just about the survivor story and perspective on this. It's also about the journey that the trustees of the art collection and the Ditchling Museum, where it's actually housed, the journey they all went through to kind of get to the point where an exhibition was put together of this and other artworks back in the summer. And so this is a film which has been entered for a couple of competitions, apparently, because it's been so well received. So when you get these slides, you'll be able to link to that hyperlink there if you want to see it. So, where are we going? What's our priorities? I've tried to distill this into something as simple as possible, really. New structures, consistency and standards. We want to be the best that we can be. What's the reason for having safeguarding staff? The only reason is to be able to support churches and circuits in what they're doing. So we are yours, if you like. As I travel around, which I do a fair bit, I often hear the term the connection. And it's a really interesting thing because I've never found the connection. The overall church, we talk about a connectional church, but we also have this term, the connection. The connection does things to us. Actually, the connection, there's some smiles around this place. The connection has to link to somebody. So often when we're talking about the connection, we mean one part of what's provided, whether that's about finance, whether that's about the TMCP, whether that's about property, whether that's about safeguarding. And I think we have to get better at naming who we're talking about if we want to actually try and make things change in the way we want to make them change. So when it comes to what we're doing in the safeguarding bit of the connectional team, if we're not actually doing things which relate to what you're doing in your churches, circuits and new projects, then we need to ask why are we doing that? Because that's the only reason that we are here. You'll know about the newer pieces of church project work, new places for new people, pioneering ministries, and other things which are being set up. That is a whole area that we're also much more heavily engaged with in terms of how do we make sure that safeguarding is in the foundation of how those new pieces of work are being set up. So we're not trying to add on afterwards, but they're actually informing and shaping the whole approach so that the new work is actually safeguarding shaped rather than seeing safeguarding as in some way inhibiting actually being able to do that new piece of mission work. Because if we work from the basis of our theology of safeguarding, safeguarding is actually about core Christian gospel values, about how we want to treat each other, how we want to deal with power, where there's a power imbalance, as inevitably there is between us. How do we work with that in a safe way? How can we use safeguarding to actually promote the church? That this is a safe place to be. This is a nourishing and a rehabilitative place to be. This is the place where we can be community, recognizing that we have all sorts of different people in community. So it's almost turning sometimes the story around, that rather than safeguarding being seen as inhibiting, it's actually enabling. At the same time, this is not a new official policy about a 5% reduction. This is Tim Carter's idea that I think we have to find ways of reducing the burden of additional tasks. The only bit I've got control over is safeguarding. This may be something which is applicable to other areas of church life, but we are becoming smaller in number. The membership of the Methodist Church is not growing, so there are less people to do things, but we have more things to do. So it gets more burdensome for people being asked to carry out additional things. And so there must come a point where that becomes just too difficult to do. So for me, one of the other things about having a connection or safeguarding team now is what can we do collectively to maintain our core safeguarding work and principles, but reduce the actual demands on people in churches and circuits? Can we actually work with our policies and make them slimmer? Do we have to do all the things that we currently say people have to do? I'm not giving any answer to that this afternoon, but for me that's a kind of challenge and a target, because otherwise I think we will have people sometimes respond and say, you're just asking me to do more and more and more, and I can't. So I'm just encouraging people to kind of do that blue skies thinking. Where could we actually save some of the things without losing any of the ground that we've gained? And lastly there, I want to encourage us to be thinking about safeguarding not as a burden but as an opportunity, that it's actually about flourishing. And I came across this quote in the Northbrook Safeguarding Children's Partnership. Moving from safeguarding to flourishing shifts the focus from merely preventing harm and mitigating risks to actively empowering individuals to thrive, develop and reach their full potential. This approach blends core protection principles with proactive opportunities, building a nurturing environment where well-being and personal growth are the ultimate goals. So we turn safeguarding into a rather different picture. It reminds me a bit of many years ago, getting that knock on the door, and you open the door, there's two suited people, and immediately you know that they're not from the Council Refuse Department, but they're from the Jehovah's Witnesses. And they wanted to show me a booklet with a picture of heaven. And there was this picture of the countryside with a lot of greenery and blue sky. And I was intrigued where they'd got this idea from as to what heaven would look like. But it was a kind of idyllic picture. Well, for me, that's where we are in terms of where we could be thinking about safeguarding. That it's actually about promotion and encouragement and enabling people to flourish and to be fully who God wants them to be. And then finally, back to our new places for new people, our new project work. I was really taken when I read this from Eunice Atwood. Some of you may know Eunice. She's just about to retire as a deacon. She worked with us in safeguarding for a number of years before she took up her post with New Places for New People. And commenting on 10 years of the Past Cases Review, because it's 10 years since that was published, Eunice said this: "The emergence of New Places for New People is a hope-filled movement across the Methodist Church, where new Christian communities are taking root in shops, hair salons, forests, beaches and digital spaces. These pioneering gatherings are marked by creativity and openness, and their flourishing depends on embedding a culture of safeguarding practices that ensure safety, dignity and trust for all who participate. The Past Cases Review, Courage, Cost and Hope reminds us of the painful and traumatizing consequences when safeguarding fails. Survivors' voices call us to courage in facing past harm, honesty about the cost borne, and hope in building safer futures. New communities draw deeply on this learning, recognizing that safeguarding is not a hurdle to mission, but a gospel foundation for it. Good practice is also emerging. Trauma-informed approaches and everyday conversations are prioritising the physical, emotional and spiritual safety of community life. Regional safeguarding surgeries, adapted training, practical templates and peer networks are equipping pioneers to navigate healthy boundaries and complex realities. By holding appropriate risk and responsible grace together, these new communities embody the gospel of Christ. Safeguarding becomes the soil in which trust grows, ensuring that new places for new people are not only creative and welcoming, but also places of healing, belonging, and hope. I just felt that Eunice embodied what I'm trying to suggest here, really. And finally, as we've been listening today and we've been discussing on our tables, it struck me that we need to be talking more about the things that we're getting right when it comes to safeguarding. You are in a church denomination which has done as much as any denomination in Britain to actually make safeguarding a living reality. I was at the Southern Superintendents Conference this week and quite struck by a superintendent coming up to speak to me in relation to a very difficult case that we've been working on for some months, where a local preacher was accused of a historical sexual abuse, and this had only come to light quite recently, made more complicated by the fact that the person who had reported this had actually died subsequently. So we were working with the records that had been collected, but we didn't actually have the individual, although we had members of her family. The local preacher had adamantly denied that this was true, what had happened, and had amassed a significant support group around himself of family and friends within the church to advocate on his behalf. That led to a very acrimonious process of risk assessment, safeguarding panel, subsequent appeal, and threats, complaints, and general agitation. The superintendent came up to say how thankful he was for the safeguarding team following it through to its conclusion, which this local preacher has been removed from his office. And what struck me was, here was a superintendent who was absolutely clear in his mind that this local preacher had groomed everybody around him. And most of the information that I had was from our staff and other safeguarding personnel working on the case. So we tend to build a bit of a mindset where it feels like it's us against everybody else. Here was the superintendent saying, I was completely convinced that you were right over this. And I thought, this is no longer just about the safeguarding personnel having to tell people in the church what's what. There are now a number of people in the church who are doing it for themselves. That says to me that our training, our advice, our sharing of policy has begun to take root. And so it now becomes a communal collective effort rather than it's just about one or two named individuals. That seems to me about culture change, so that we can then actually have some confidence that we have a shared understanding of this. And so if somebody does decide tomorrow after church to try and tell one of us that there's something that's not right, we will be better prepared for that. That's just about all I wanted to share with you. I think there are some prepared questions coming my way, which may or may not answer questions that you might have.
Well, these are questions that we asked people to submit. We had 10 questions in total, but you've answered the first two, which were on sort of the new safeguarding service, the connectional safeguarding service and what that is. So we'll start with number 3, which is how can we improve clarity around safeguarding roles and responsibilities, particularly ensuring that group leaders understand and fulfil their duties around safer recruitment and risk assessments, and can this be more clearly embedded within training?
Yeah, I think most definitely it can be more bedded in training. I think that's a kind of key part to this. As I said, we've got the advanced module is being refreshed completely for next year, so we can roll that into the discussions which are happening in that working group now. I think we all have a part as well to play in the promotion and the encouragement of this. It's not just restricted to a small number of people.
Excellent. I'll move over because I need to be by this microphone as well. So the next one is what role do district and connectional audits and then independent reviews play in strengthening safeguarding arrangements and accountability across the church?
I think that's a fundamental area that we are getting into much more now. Some sort of independent scrutiny of what we're doing, I think in terms of building public confidence, that we're not just marking our own homework all the time. I think giving ourselves confidence that we're not unhappy about people looking at what we're doing and assessing it. We have had an internal church audit programme going for a few years now. From the safeguarding committee, they've been working their way around all of the districts, doing 4 or 5 a year. That's when they go in really not to do a sort of whole assessment programme of a district, but to kind of dip sample, to have a selection of people to interview and to ask as much really where are the elements of good practice here, as much as where are the things which aren't working. That audit programme will complete early next year, 2027, and then the Safeguarding Committee will present all of the themes just come out of that, and they're working to an external auditor to say, you know, what does this look like? What do you think? So I think towards the end of next year, once that review has happened, we will then see stage 2, I suppose, of how we want to audit and inspect our safeguarding work. Of course, during that period of time since the committee started this audit programme, quite a lot has changed. Some of the districts they started with aren't there any longer, and we now have our connectional safeguarding service, which wasn't there before. So things move on. So it will be interesting to see where we are next year in terms of how they decide to take this forward. But I think it's certainly something which is here to stay in terms of being able to have somebody saying, with a degree of independence, this is how well the Methodist Church is doing.
So you mentioned then about the RS as being part of the connectional safeguarding team. So now that they are part of that connectional safeguarding team, what impact do you envisage for those people who volunteer as church and circuit safeguarding officers?
I would say that you are just as important as you were yesterday. I don't think the advent of our new team is going to change what we need from people that give of their time in churches and circuits. We haven't really increased the resource that the church is putting into this. We've simply brought together what we had and put them into one structure. So that doesn't really change the kind of the additional, doesn't really increase the resource. I hope we can use it more effectively so that we may actually be able to increase some of the things that we do just because of that. But it remains that this is a shared approach to safeguarding. A connectional team, district safeguarding group, circuit safeguarding officers, church safeguarding officers, all working together and being able to get best value out of the different roles that those people play.
So sticking with circuit safeguarding officers, what is your view on employing circuit safeguarding officers either as a dedicated role or combined with another post such as an admin or a youth worker? And how does this relate to situations where churches are struggling to recruit a safeguarding officer?
I think it's a very apt question, actually. There's nothing to stop churches circuits deciding to fund that post. Some already do that for a variety of reasons. As I said about my idea about this 5% reduction, we do sometimes have churches and circuits that are really finding it difficult to appoint to the post. The idea of sharing with a neighbouring church or neighbouring circuit isn't always that practical, again for a variety of reasons. So it may be that for some of those situations the only option is to think about employment. And I think that's probably going to become a question which is more current again as we get a bit smaller. I'm not sure what the current projections are, but we as a church have been dropping by roughly 5% a year in terms of membership. We also have an interesting age distribution. We're a good collector of older people, and we should celebrate what we provide for that. But if you look at the population structure, we do have quite a lot of people who are over 80. So if we are not replenishing, you can see over the next 10 years, 15 years, that there will continue to be a drop-off. There are just practical considerations in terms of how we continue to service the structure that we've decided as a church we want to have. And it may well be that the best response we can make is to offer some kind of remuneration for people to do the work, as they do sometimes with finances in church. Some churches do pay for that service, some pay for HR services. So that may be the area that we see happening more often.
So you've talked about refreshing the advanced course next year. Is there a scope for a shorter refresher version of the advanced safeguarding training for those who've already completed it?
I think the first thing to say is that in my time, which is 10 years in this role, and I don't know how many years before as a volunteer in the Bristol district around safeguarding, I can't think of the training course staying the same any time it's been reviewed. And because we refresh them every 4 years, you almost get a new course. So I don't think there's been many experiences of people sat there going through exactly the same thing that they did before. But we do hear from some quarters people that feel, it's still quite a lot of their time spent having to do the training. We hear at least as many people say that the training that they have to do is not done often enough. Some people professionally expect to have to be retrained every year, not every 4 years. Our sister denominations, our Church of England particularly, and URC do it every 3 years. I'm not sure really that half a day, 3/4 of the day, every 4 years is really that big a commitment, unless you're incredibly busy. But we're always going to have people that feel differently about these things. But I'm fairly confident that our training is always worth doing because it's different to the last time we did it. But as I say, the advanced module particularly has been looked at again, and I know that they are looking at whether there are other ways in which it can be sliced up so that it can be more applicable for certain roles, and rather than just having one course that everybody does. Interestingly, I've just done my advanced module training as a member of the Connexional team with other Connexional team managers, and I was very conscious, sat with them in that with people from different teams the course that we were going through was probably just a bit too generic with such a diversity of people. So I think it will be helpful for us to think again about how can we make it as specific as possible without ending up with such a lovely suite of different ways of doing it that we can't actually logistically deliver it. So there's always some kind of balance around, you know, how many versions we can have and how many days we can make available to actually put it on.
So you talked then about other denominations. So the Anglican Church has proposed a virtual college for safeguarding. Is there any appetite for a jointly resourced and shared training platform across denominations?
I think that's quite an exciting idea and certainly worth looking at. My only proviso is that anything like that, we would just need to balance the resources. If we are making new opportunities available for more learning, that's got to be good, but it probably means we've got to pay for that as a church and make the time available from our staff, which will mean they won't be doing something else. So I think there's always a kind of balance that we've got to kind of get some kind of happy medium between those things, but I think it's certainly worth exploring. Generally, anything like this, we've just had a recent training working group, and the Church of England training officer is now starting to come to that more regularly, and at the last meeting is pretty much, unless I heard it wrong, offered us all of their training stuff and very willing to work with us on developing new stuff. So I always nod my head vigorously when the Church of England is offering us stuff, because that means that we won't have to spend as much money, and they've got a lot more than we've got.
The next one is, can churches be given clearer, simplified guidance on safeguarding compliance requirements, particularly around DBS eligibility, the role of risk assessments where safeguarding and health and safety sort of overlap?
One of the really disappointing things about the ICSA inquiry that reported 2 years ago or so now, with the things that they said should now happen, was that they didn't really go very far with the DBS and PVG scheme in Scotland by saying, you know, we're going to review this, or there should be a review. So we are still stuck with the scheme as it is, and a lot of the things I think we get concerns or complaints about from churches are to do with things which are beyond our control. They are actually stipulated by the DBS. They are the legal requirements of the scheme. So I think if there are specific confusions or concerns about the Methodist guidance on the website, then we need to hear those to actually improve that. We have just been having a conversation in the management team about the complicated nature of where we have tried to help churches by having a number of roles on the drop-down menu, so that there is clarity about which level of check you need for which role. In conversations that staff, particularly regional officers, have been having with the DBS outreach regional team, they are pushing us to say it's not about the job title, it's about the activity. So somehow we've got to square these two things, because we have some job titles which are so wide in terms of what activities might be undertaken. It's actually quite difficult for us to say, if you're this, then that's the level of check you need. So the critical one, I think, is probably pastoral visitor. So what level of DBS check do I need if I'm a pastoral visitor? Is it basic? Is it enhanced? We don't know unless you tell us what sort of pastoral visitor you are. The example I give, which you may have heard me give before, is my class leader in my church, Keith, who was in his, I think, late 80s. The extent of his pastoral support to me as the class leader was once a year, if he saw me at church at the end, he would thrust my membership card into my hand, and he might say hello, he may just smile. Whereas another pastoral visitor may actually be involved in quite substantial care for somebody who is going through some post-rehabilitative situation after illness, coming out of hospital. You know, kind of daily visits and great amount of help. So our term pastoral visitor can cover such a wide range and will vary perhaps from time to time. So there is some work to be done around this, but we are a little bit constrained by the DBS scheme as it is. But if there are things we can do to make our guidance clearer, that would be good to hear.
And then, sorry, following up on activity risk assessments where safeguarding and health and safety sort of overlap.
Yeah, now I don't think they should, and I think again there's been some confusion around that. Safeguarding risk assessments are about people's conduct, which are very different to health and safety risk assessments. And I think what we sometimes inevitably do without thinking about it is that we just use the term risk assessment and we don't specify which one we're talking about, and they can get a bit confused.
Can I just come in here? It is in policy about having activity risk assessments, which are risk assessments of activities in buildings, not the people.
Yeah, and the policy currently says that activity risk assessment should be sent to the regional officer to look over, which I think is good practice. I'm conscious that's not happening consistently, so I think that's something that we need to look at. When we did have a conversation just recently about that in the team, it was felt, well, there's a good reason why we might do that. It's not happening consistently, and whether it's too much to expect, or whether it's just something that we need to remind people to do.
And then finally, this is a question you may not be able to answer, but we were asked, so I'll ask it anyway. What guidance can you offer on supporting transgender employees in churches, particularly regarding access to toilet facilities where only gendered options are available?
Yeah. This is really interesting. It's actually got me doing some research late last night as I was laid in bed, because actually I think it's a bit confused at the moment. I hadn't realised that the government had, I knew there was questions have been raised. The government had actually given a response earlier in the year, but that response itself, I believe, is being challenged.
Yeah.
So whilst there is an official response, I think this is going to keep unfolding. In the earlier discussions that happened before the government's response, the Methodist Property Secretary had picked this up, as had the person responsible for equalities and inclusion. And it made me realise that this is as much to do with properties and EDI stuff as it is to do with safeguarding, quite frankly. And I think that probably we need to be careful how we get pulled into being the answer to this, because it's about a wider conversation. There are safeguarding aspects, but I'm not sure it's for safeguarding to resolve solely on our own. So I think this is one of those, well, let me say two things. On the one hand, I think it's kind of watch this space a little bit to see how the national debates are going to unfold a bit, because it's still going on. If there are particular local questions that people may be asking, particularly people who are trans, then I think we need to give consideration to that on a case-by-case basis and look at what the facilities are in the place that they're either worshipping or working, and making sure that that's been picked up through their line management or whoever oversees that person, so that it's not something which is just being ignored.
Thank you very much, Tim. Just to say a big thank you to Tim for coming up and doing the presentation today. Now I'm going to hand over to Linda for our plenary before our closing devotions.
Thank you. Well, what a lot to take in today. We very much hope that you've all got something that you can take away today. You know, there's a lot of food for thought, a lot of processing, a lot of thinking. But really, if we start off with Caroline, her opening devotions talked about light and dark. And it's very much, any abuse should never be kept in the dark within churches. We need to shed God's light working through us in the support and the understanding and the helping and the preventing, everything that comes within the territory of safeguarding. Because as we've heard, it can have such a devastating impact when we either get it wrong or we're working with survivors for whom it's already gone wrong. We can't fix that, but we can do our best. She talked about there's a cost to safeguarding within people in churches. We're not talking about monetary costs. We're talking about a cost of being the person that you're trusted with someone's deepest, darkest memories when they're disclosing to you, or the cost of being vigilant, the cost of, you know, devoting time to training and everything. But I think very much embedded in my heart today going home is the cost that our survivors, those that have experienced abuse and are experiencing abuse right today, it's not stopping, right today, the cost in terms of trauma, not just to their mental well-being, but their physicality, their physical bodies. I think that's something that really came across loud and clear from what Karen was talking about today, that we might not appreciate. It's not just up here, it's our whole head to toe bodies impacted. Excuse me. And how often have we said to people that we see are maybe upset for whatever reason, first thing we say, it's a natural thing, isn't it? What's up? Tell me about it. So that's a really good takeaway, I think, for us this afternoon is, what do you need? Can I be of help? I think if that's one thing that I do, and I'm sure a lot of people in conversation, I think we've all been talking about the fact that, you know, something so simple as that, or just sit alongside in silence with someone while their trauma is worked through their body, and then have a conversation. It's really powerful. So thank you, Karen, for saying that to us. Okay, and then Cole and Helen. Right, the safeguarding, yeah, it's not just about us and our church people, it's about the future. It's about our children, grandchildren, parents, grandparents, everyone we know within our churches and outside. So it's thinking of them. You know, when people are saying, oh, I've got to do that training again, it's that there's a purpose to this and there's a reason behind it to do that. And we explored what's the difference between surviving and safeguarding. What's helpful and unhelpful. And when we were planning the conference, we wanted you all, including ourselves, as regional officers of safeguarding, to learn today. We never stop learning. We're not the experts. We're always learning. But we wanted you to go away with an idea of what you can take back to your churches, because the work of safeguarding doesn't finish. Okay, it's something you can take back of what is helpful if you know you have survivors, and we know that's not always the case in churches. Survivors still to this day choose not to share their stories for many, many good reasons. But what is helpful versus what is unhelpful? And I've actually written down, I tried to write as quick as I could, Cole, when you were going through all those comments. I'll type them up and we'll include them with the slides on the MWED district. You know, because some of you might think, when you get home, oh, I can't remember some of the things you said. Oh, that would be brilliant, Carl, thank you. No, that would be brilliant, thank you. And the car crash video. My goodness, you know, you hear someone's been in an accident and all of the attention is on the victim of that crash. But we don't do it for people who maybe for years in the past have suffered and are suffering and traumatised, and still that trauma's triggered. And I know that working with our survivor groups, some of them feel that they're just a nuisance. We would never say, a person who's been in a car crash is a nuisance. So Helen, thank you so much for that powerful video that we had today from you. So it's really what you're going to take back to church, because it's all very well coming today, and it's been fantastic welcoming you, and we really do thank you for your time today. But what advocates are you going to be when you get back to church to actually put some of this to our congregations? Some of them who aren't on the list for safeguarding training, who might not have a clue about safeguarding. They want to come to church every week and then go home and that's it, they're oblivious. But they might well be the people who conversations around safeguarding might come up. We might have survivors talk to them over coffee. Right. Now on the table outside, you'll see lots of little cards with affirmations on them, and you're invited to just have a little look at them as you go out, and any that really speak to you, do take them home with you. You have the Bible emergency numbers if you've not put those in your bag already to take away. We've put those out because some of those we think speak to, when you need courage, when you're feeling discouraged, when you're upset. There are lots of things there that maybe you can just have a little look at a Bible verse that might encourage you in your faith, might soothe you if you need soothing or whatever with that. As I said, everything's going to be going onto the NWED website in due course. Can't give you a time scale there at the moment. But some thank yous. First of all, I have thanked you, haven't I, for coming. Yeah, very important. It would have been a really, really bad conference if you'd been standing up the whole time. So I'm going to start off with reverse order, really, of maybe importance or not. But if we've been standing without tables or anything, you'd all be up, for goodness sakes, where you go. So just thank the team here at Leyland Methodist Church, who have been absolute stars, haven't they, in setting the tables out. They're out before 8:30 this morning, yes. Keeping you well refreshed with teas and coffees and your bickies there. Been absolutely fantastic, helping with the AV. We've also got Sam Rimmer at the back we'd like to thank. Right, thank you to him. He's been doing all the techie stuff with Jack, who, if we have to sort of name a techie regional officer for safeguarding, Jack really is our go-to godsend here. So thank you, Jack, for doing all the tech there. Thank you obviously to Caroline for our opening devotions and to our speakers. Is Karen still here actually? You moved, haven't you, on that? Thank you so much to Karen Johnson here. Right, thank you. To Cole Ritson and Helen White. Okay, thank you. To Tim Carter. Thank you. I suppose we've got to thank Alan Bradley, because otherwise he's not going to get a clap, is he? He's going to take our closing devotions now. So Alan, I'd like to hand over to you. Yeah. Oh, I don't need that. I've just done talking. I'm good at that. Yeah.
We do want to say a big thank you to our regional officers for safeguarding, don't we? And for Linda. I was just thinking safeguarding, and the first safeguarding conference I ever went to and spoke at was 25 years ago in the Methodist Church. I know I look so young, don't I? It's the oil of Olay day cream that makes it. But 25 years ago, and the theme that we came up to, I was part of the group that was doing it, was beyond belief. Because at that stage, it was not a thing in the church. And it's great to hear Tim speaking about safeguarding being rooted in the church and at every aspect of the life of our church. And I'm so pleased to see so many of you given of your time, given of your Saturday to come and to continue your learning and your thinking and our growing together in this district and throughout our circuits and churches to be part of a healthy church. And in a sense, what Tim shared about being a flourishing church and a thriving church when it comes to safeguarding. I was chatting to my daughter last night, and she was talking about creating brave spaces. And I like that sense of the church being a brave space, something more than a safe space. I've got a little image to go up on the screen. Some of you know I was in Zimbabwe a couple of weeks ago. We were at Victoria Falls, and that's my wife on the right, Carol, hanging off. We've talked about Jacob's Ladder. They climbed down the cliff. Gail, one of the members at Knutsford Methodist Church, alongside her, and they did that together. But the bravest person is not the person in the picture. Those two just jumped off the edge quite happily. The bravest person was me at the top with the camera, because I am absolutely petrified of heights. But actually the staff there were just so gentle and so caring, and just were with me at the top with my knees knocking while they did the brave thing. And I just want to leave that picture up there at the moment, and just that we might be a brave church, that people can feel that they can be safe enough to be vulnerable, to be able to grow beyond abuse, and that we might be a safe space. There's a lot of safety equipment that enables you to experience the joy of Victoria Falls hanging 100 meters above it from a gorge. And may the church be that safe space. I'm thankful that you are all here today. I'm thankful for the courage in this room. I'm thankful for the expert voices that we've heard and the voices of experience. I'm thankful for connections that we've spoke about and that we've all made. I'm thankful for the church giving us this time. And I'm thankful too for the presence of Christ that does make us brave. Bible month next month is from Philippians. We'll be looking at the book of Philippians. And in Philippians chapter 4, Paul writes, "Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near." Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Let us just take a moment of quiet. You can keep your eyes open if you need to, or closed. Just a moment to recognize God's presence, the presence of Christ who is near. And in the stillness of this moment, we give thanks for today. We give thanks for those who have given of their time and their wisdom and experience to lead us. We give thanks for those who are part of the church who enable us to be brave. And we give thanks for the presence of Christ, a presence that brings us joy and comfort, that brings promise of security and peace. Gracious God, we thank you for the time we've had today, enabling us to grow and to hopefully create a strong but gentle space, a brave and a safe space, that we all might flourish. Lord, we recognize within us our own fears and our own areas that we have to work on. But we pray as we go from this place, we may also know your presence with us. Help us to take what we've learned today back into our churches, to continue the conversation, to keep safeguarding right at the heart of all that we do, right at the heart of the gospel that we share and live. Gracious God, be with us now, we pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless you all and thank you.